Commander Sarah Chun stood at the wide window of her ship and looked down at the planet below. New Hokkaido was a small world, covered in green forests and blue lakes. From space, it looked peaceful and safe. The mining colony sat in a valley, between two mountain ranges, its white buildings shining in the morning sun. Sarah had been watching over this colony for 2 years now. Her ship, the UES Steadfast, was not the biggest or newest in the human fleet, but it was strong and reliable. Just like the people living on the planet below, the colony was home to 2,400 people. Most of them were miners who dug rare metals from the ground. But there were also doctors, teachers, engineers, and families with children. They had come here to build a new life, far from the crowded cities of Earth. Sarah walked to her command chair and sat down. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Lieutenant Davis, her second-in-command, was reading reports from the planet's surface. Ensign Martinez monitored the space around their ship, watching for any other vessels that might approach. Any problems today, Lieutenant? Sarah asked. Davis looked up from his screen. No, ma'am. Dr. Webb sent his weekly report an hour ago. Everything is normal down there. The new fusion reactor is working well. Crop production is up 15% from last month. The children started a new school year yesterday. Sarah smiled. Dr. Marcus Webb was the colony administrator, a smart man who cared deeply about everyone under his protection. He had a daughter named Lisa, who was 8 years old. Sarah had met them both during her last visit to the surface. Lisa was a bright girl who wanted to be a spaceship pilot when she grew up. What about the other patrol ships? Sarah asked. The Calgary is checking the asteroid belt on the far side of the system, Davis replied. The Mumbai is doing a sweep of the outer planets. Both report all clear. Sarah nodded. 3 ships to guard one small colony might seem like too much, but Earth Command wanted to show the aliens that humans took care of their own. The hegemony had not been happy when humans started building colonies this far from Earth, but they had signed a treaty that allowed it. The hegemony was a group of 4 alien species who controlled this part of the galaxy. They had been here long before humans learned to travel between stars. At first, they tried to stop human expansion completely. They said humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous, but humans kept coming anyway. They built colonies on empty worlds that nobody else wanted. They mined asteroids and grew food in space stations. They traded honestly and fought only when attacked first. Slowly, the aliens began to accept that humans were here to stay. The treaty they signed 3 years ago gave humans the right to settle in certain areas. The aliens called these areas designated zones and mostly ignored what happened there. As long as humans stayed in their assigned space, there would be peace. Sarah thought this arrangement worked well. The colony below was proof that humans could build something good and lasting, even in the cold darkness between stars. The people of New Hokkaido had turned an empty world into a home. Commander, Ensign Martinez called from his station. I'm getting a priority transmission from Earth Command. Sarah straightened in her chair. Priority transmissions were rare and usually meant trouble. Put it through to my private com. She walked to a small room behind the bridge and activated the secure communication system. The screen flickered as it tried to connect across the vast distance to Earth. After a few seconds, the image cleared and she could see Admiral Torres, the commander of the Colonial Defense Force. Commander Chun, the Admiral said. Her face looked tired and worried. I need to tell you something important. We have been monitoring increased hegemony fleet movements in your sector. Intelligence suggests they may be planning some kind of action against human colonies. Sarah felt a cold feeling in her stomach. What kind of action, Admiral? We're not sure yet, but I want you to be ready for anything. Keep your ships close to the colony and maintain full sensor sweeps. If you see any hegemony vessels approaching, contact me immediately. Understood, Admiral. How many ships are we talking about? The Admiral paused before answering. Our long-range sensors have detected at least 30 vessels gathering near the Kethmora system. That's only 2 jumps away from you. 30 ships. Sarah's 3 vessels would be no match for a force that size. But surely the hegemony would not break their own treaty. They had more to lose than humans did if war started again. Admiral, you think they would actually attack the colony? The treaty clearly states that human settlements in designated zones are protected. I don't know, Commander, but I've learned not to trust alien promises when they start moving warships around. Just be careful and keep me informed. The transmission began to break up with static. Admiral, you're breaking up. Can you repeat that last part? The screen filled with white noise. Sarah tried to restore the connection, but the signal was completely lost. She tried several more times, but got nothing except empty static. She returned to the bridge feeling troubled. Lieutenant Davis noticed her expression immediately. Bad news from home, Commander? Maybe contact the Calgary and Mumbai. I want both ships to return to orbit around New Hokkaido immediately and increase our sensor range to maximum. I want to know about any ship that comes within 5 light hours of this system. Yes, ma'am. Should I alert the colony? Sarah thought. About this, Dr. Webb and his people deserved to know if there might be danger. But she also did not want to cause panic over what might be nothing more than routine fleet movements. Not yet. Let's see what our sensors pick up first. But make sure our weapons are ready and our shields are charged. As her crew carried out these orders, Sarah returned to the window. The colony below looked the same as always. Peaceful, safe, home to thousands of people who trusted her to protect them. In the colony's main street, children were walking to school with their parents. Engineers were heading to the mining facilities. Farmers were checking their crops in the greenhouse domes. Normal life continued, unaware that somewhere in the darkness between stars, alien warships might be heading their way. Sarah had served in the Colonial Defense Force for 15 years. She had fought pirates and hostile aliens. She had seen colonies attacked and destroyed. But something felt different this time. The Admiral's worried face, the size of the fleet gathering at Kethmora, the broken transmission, it all added up to something bigger than a simple patrol or training exercise. She touched the communication panel on her chair. Dr. Webb, this is Commander Chun. How are things on the surface today? Webb's voice came through clearly. Good morning, Commander. Everything is fine here. Lisa just left for school, and she wanted me to ask if you might visit us again soon. She has some new drawings of spaceships to show you. Sarah smiled despite her worries. Tell her I'd love to see them. Dr. Webb, I want you to know that we're going to have all 3 patrol ships in close orbit for the next few days. Just a routine security exercise. I understand, Commander. Thank you for keeping us safe up there. If only it were that simple, Sarah thought as she ended the transmission. But she had made a promise to these people, and she intended to keep it. Whatever was coming, the colony of New Hokkaido would not face it alone. 6 hours later, the communication system crackled back to life. Commander Sarah Chun was in her quarters trying to rest when Lieutenant Davis called her to the bridge. She hurried through the ship's corridors, knowing that restored contact with Earth Command could bring either good news or very bad news. Commander on the bridge, Davis announced as she entered. The entire crew looked tense. They had all felt the worry in the air since the broken transmission. What do we have, Lieutenant? Full communication is restored, ma'am. Admiral Torres is waiting to speak with you. The message is marked urgent priority. Sarah sat in her command chair and activated the main screen. Admiral Torres appeared, but this time her face looked even more serious than before. Commander Chun, I'm sorry for the communication breakdown. We've been dealing with a crisis situation here. I need to give you some very important information. Sarah felt her heart beat faster. I'm listening, Admiral. The hegemony has sent an official message to Earth Command. They are claiming that human colonies in the outer sectors represent a growing threat to regional stability. Under Article 7 of the Treaty of Kethmara, they are giving us 72 hours to evacuate all human settlements beyond the Sol system. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. 72 hours to evacuate 2,400 people. It was impossible. Even if every ship in the human fleet came to help, they could not move that many people in such a short time. Admiral, That's impossible, and they know it. Our evacuation procedures require at least 2 weeks minimum. The colony has families, equipment, livestock, medical patients who cannot be moved quickly. I know, Commander. We believe this is exactly what they want. They're giving us a deadline they know we cannot meet. Sarah's hands gripped the arms of her chair. What does Earth Command want me to do? Protect the colony. Do everything you can to keep those people safe? We're sending every available ship your way, but the closest reinforcements are 4 months out. 4 months. Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. They were all listening, and she could see the same thought in their eyes. 3 ships against the entire hegemony fleet. Admiral, what about diplomatic channels? Can we negotiate for more time? We've already tried. The Hegemony Council has refused all requests for extension or negotiation. They say the matter is closed. Admiral Torres paused. Commander, there's something else. Our intelligence sources suggest this isn't really about the colonies being a threat. The Hegemony has been planning this for months. They want to test human resolve. They want to see if we'll fight for our people or abandon them when faced with superior force. Sarah understood. This was not about treaty violations or regional stability. This was about whether humanity would accept being pushed around by aliens who saw them as inferior. The hegemony wanted to put humans back in their place. The 72-hour deadline starts when? It started 20 minutes ago, Commander. I'm sorry we couldn't get word to you sooner. After the transmission ended, Sarah sat in silence for several minutes. Her crew waited patiently for orders. Finally, she spoke. Contact Dr. Webb immediately. Tell him I need to speak with him right away. Then get me the captains of the Calgary and Mumbai on a secure channel. 10 minutes later, Sarah was looking at 4 faces on her screen. Dr. Webb appeared from his office in the colony. Captain Rodriguez of the Calgary and Captain Singh of the Mumbai connected from their ships. Lieutenant Davis joined them from his station. Gentlemen, we have a situation, Sarah began. She explained everything the Admiral had told her. As she spoke, she watched the faces of the 3 men change from confusion to disbelief to anger. Dr. Webb was the first to speak when she finished. 72 hours? Commander, that's madness. We have people here who have lived on this world for 3 years. This is their home. Their life savings are invested in this place. I know, Doctor. But we have to face the reality that the hegemony fleet will arrive soon. How quickly can you prepare defensive positions? Webb thought for a moment. The mining equipment can be converted to build barriers and bunkers. We have some hunting rifles and emergency weapons. But Commander, these are farmers and miners, not soldiers. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward on his screen. Doctor, how many people can you get into the deepest underground shelters? Maybe 300 in the mining tunnels. 500 if we pack them in tight. But that leaves almost 1,500 people on the surface. Captain Singh spoke up. What about evacuation? How many people can we actually move in 72 hours? Sarah had already done the math. Our 3 ships can carry maybe 800 people total. If we strip out everything non-essential and pack them in like cargo, but that means leaving everyone else behind. The silence that followed was heavy. They all knew what that meant. Someone would have to choose who lived and who stayed to face the hegemony fleet. Dr. Webb broke the silence. Commander, I won't ask you to make that choice. If we can only save 800 people, we'll hold a lottery. Fair and random. No, Sarah said firmly. We're not abandoning anyone. We're going to find another way. What other way? Singh asked. 3 ships against 30 or more? Will be destroyed in the first hour of fighting. Sarah stood up and walked to the window that showed the planet below. In the colony, people were going about their normal day. Children were playing in the schoolyard. Workers were coming home from their shifts. Nobody knew yet that their world was about to end. We're not going to run, and we're not going to hide. We're going to make the hegemony pay such a high price for this attack that they'll regret ever threatening human civilians. She turned back to the screen. Dr. Webb, I want you to begin evacuation procedures immediately. Get the children and elderly into the deep shelters first. Prepare all other civilians for emergency evacuation, but also start building defensive positions. If we're going to fight, we'll make it as hard as possible for them. Captain Rodriguez, Captain Singh, bring your ships into close defensive formation around the planet. Prepare all weapons and charge all shields to maximum. Send all non-essential crew to the planet's surface. Commander, Singh said carefully, we should at least try to contact the Hegemony fleet. Maybe we can negotiate something, Sarah nodded. You're right. Open a channel to Admiral Zethkar. He's the Hegemony fleet commander. It took 30 minutes to establish contact with the alien fleet. When Admiral Zethkar appeared on the screen, Sarah was reminded why humans found the Hegemony so unsettling. Zethkar was a Corvani, a reptilian species with cold yellow eyes and skin like old leather. He spoke perfect English, but his voice had no emotion in it. Commander Chun, I assume you are calling to discuss evacuation procedures. Admiral Zethkar, I'm requesting an extension of the deadline. 72 hours is not enough time to safely evacuate 2,400 civilians. The deadline is final. Your species has had 3 years to consider the consequences of your expansion. The time for consideration is over. Admiral, these are innocent people. Families with children, scientists, and farmers. They are not a threat. To anyone, Zethkar's cold eyes showed no emotion. Your species lacks the wisdom to limit its own expansion. We will provide that wisdom. You have 67 hours and 14 minutes remaining. What if we refuse to leave? Then you will learn the same lesson that other species have learned. The Hegemony has maintained order in this region for 2,000 years. We will not allow upstart mammals to disrupt that order. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. And if we fight, then you will die. Your 3 small ships against our 37 warships, your colonial militia against our trained soldiers. The outcome is certain. The screen went dark as Zethkar ended the transmission. Sarah looked at her crew, and the faces still connected from the other ships and the colony. They all understood now. This was not a negotiation or a treaty dispute. This was extermination, disguised as law enforcement. 67 hours, she said quietly. Dr. Webb, how long do you need to get everyone into the shelters? 12 hours if we work non-stop. Then that's what we'll do. We'll give them 12 hours to get ready, and then we'll show the Hegemony what humans do when someone threatens our families. As the transmission ended, Sarah returned to the window. The sun was setting over New Hokkaido, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. It looked peaceful and beautiful. In 67 hours it might all be ashes, but they would not go quietly into the dark. The Hegemony was about to learn that humans fought hardest when they had everything to lose. The Hegemony fleet arrived exactly 72 hours after the deadline was announced. Commander Sarah Chun watched from the bridge of the Steadfast as 37 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Each ship was larger than her entire patrol force combined. All stations report ready, Commander, Lieutenant Davis said. His voice was steady, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. Around the bridge, her crew worked at their stations with quiet determination. They all knew they were about to die, but none of them spoke of retreat. Signal from the colony, ma'am, Ensign Martinez reported. Dr. Webb says the last group is entering the deep shelters now. All children and elderly are secure. Sarah nodded. They had worked for 3 days straight to get as many people as possible into the underground mining tunnels. It was not enough space for everyone, but it was the best they could do. Open a channel to the Calgary and Mumbai. Captain Rodriguez and Captain Singh appeared on her screen. Both men looked tired but determined. Gentlemen, it's been an honor serving with you, Sarah said. Remember, our job is to buy time for the people below. Every minute we keep fighting is another minute for them to get deeper underground. Understood, Commander, Rodriguez replied. My crew is ready. Singh nodded. We'll follow your lead. Sarah closed the channel and looked out at the planet below. From space, New Hokkaido still looked peaceful. The morning sun was rising over the colony, painting the mountains in golden light. In the underground shelters, hundreds of people waited. In darkness, trusting her to protect them, the Hegemony fleet began moving toward the planet in perfect formation. Admiral Zethkar's flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Judgment of Stars, led the advance. Sarah had studied hegemony tactics during her training. They preferred to demonstrate overwhelming power before attacking, hoping to break enemy. Morale. Incoming transmission from the hegemony flagship, Martinez announced. Put it through. Admiral Zethkar appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Sarah could see the bridge of his ship filled with alien officers. Everything looked cold and efficient. Commander Chun, this is your final opportunity to surrender. Order your ships to stand down and we will allow you to evacuate your people. Sarah stood up from her command chair. Admiral, we've already told you. We cannot evacuate 2,400 people in such a short time. We need more time. Time has expired. Will you surrender your ships? No. Zethkar's cold yellow eyes showed no emotion. Then you have chosen death for your colonists. We will now demonstrate the price of defying the hegemony. The transmission ended. Sarah watched as the alien fleet spread out in attack formation. She had seen this formation before in military studies. It was designed to attack from multiple angles while preventing any escape. All ships, defensive positions around the colony, Sarah ordered. Focus fire on any ship that targets civilian areas. The first shots came from the hegemony fleet's long-range weapons. Beams of purple energy reached across space toward the 3 human ships. Sarah felt the steadfast shake as the shields absorbed. The impact. Return fire, she ordered. Target their lead ships. The human ships fought back with everything they had. Their weapons were smaller than the alien ones, but they were accurate and powerful. The Calgary scored a direct hit on a hegemony cruiser, causing it to fall back with damage to its hull, but for every shot the humans landed, the aliens fired 10. The Mumbai took heavy damage to its engine section and began falling behind. Captain. Singh's voice crackled over the communication system. Port engine is gone. We're losing power to weapons. Fall back to secondary position, Sarah ordered. Protect the colony's power station. The battle continued for 2 hours. Sarah's small fleet fought with desperate courage, but they were slowly being overwhelmed. The hegemony ships were too many and too strong. One by one, the human weapons fell silent as power systems failed and crew members were injured. Then Admiral Zethkar made his first mistake. Instead of finishing off the human ships quickly, he decided to send a message. The hegemony fleet stopped firing at the military targets and turned their weapons toward the planet's surface. You see, Commander Chun, Zethkar's voice came over the communication system. This is what happens to those who defy us. We will now show your colonists the price of human arrogance. The first bombardment hit the colony's main power plant. The explosion lit up the morning sky like a second sun. Sarah watched in horror as the buildings she had protected for 2 years began to burn. No, she shouted. Those are civilian targets. The Geneva Convention forbids attacking non-military installations. Zethkar's laugh was cold and cruel. Your human laws mean nothing here. We make the laws in this region of space. The alien ships continued their bombardment. They targeted the communication towers, the landing pads, the water treatment facilities. They were not trying to kill quickly. They were trying to make the colonists suffer before they died. In the underground shelters, Dr. Webb held his daughter Lisa as the walls shook around them. Emergency lights flickered as dust fell from the ceiling. The people around them prayed and cried and held each other close. Daddy, why are the aliens doing this to us? Lisa asked. Her 8-year-old voice was small and frightened in the darkness. Dr. Webb did not know how to answer. How could he explain to his child that some beings in the universe enjoyed causing pain? That there were creatures who saw humans as nothing more than animals to be controlled or destroyed? I don't know, sweetheart, he whispered. But Commander Chun is up there fighting for us. She won't let them hurt us. Above them, Sarah's ship was dying. The Steadfast had taken direct hits to its weapon systems and life support. Half her crew was dead or wounded. The ship's hull was cracked and atmosphere was leaking into space. "Commander," Davis called from his damaged station. "We're losing life support on decks 3 and 4. Hull breaches on multiple levels." Sarah looked at her tactical display. The Calgary was dead in space, its crew evacuated to escape pods. The Mumbai was still fighting, but it was badly damaged and could not last much longer. On the planet's surface, the bombardment continued. The aliens were being careful now, targeting the colony piece by piece. They wanted the people in the shelters to hear every explosion, to know that their world was being destroyed above their heads. "All remaining crew to escape pods," Sarah ordered. "Abandon ship. What about you, Commander?" Davis asked. Sarah looked down at the planet one more time. In the colony, the elementary school where Lisa Webb learned to read was now a pile of burning rubble. The hospital where Dr. Martinez had saved lives was torn open like a broken toy. The community center where families gathered for celebrations was nothing but smoke and ash. "I'm staying. Maybe I can ram the flagship, cause some damage." "Commander, that's suicide. So is everything else we've done today." But before Sarah could carry out her desperate plan, she received a transmission from the colony. Dr. Webb's voice was filled with static and desperation. "Commander Chun, this is Dr. Webb. Please respond. We're willing to surrender completely. Tell them we give up. Tell them to stop the bombing." Sarah opened the channel to the Hegemony flagship. Admiral Zethkar appeared on her cracked screen, looking satisfied with his work. "Admiral, the colony is offering complete surrender. Please stop the bombardment." Zethkar looked at her with those cold yellow eyes. "Surrender? After your resistance?" "I think not, Commander. Your species needs to learn a lesson that will not be forgotten. They're civilians, women and children. They had nothing to do with our military resistance. They are humans, that is enough." The bombardment intensified. The aliens began targeting the mining areas where they knew the shelters were located. Sarah watched helplessly as explosions walked across the landscape toward the underground refuges. In the deep tunnels, the walls began to crack. Water pipes burst and emergency lights failed. Parents covered their children with their own bodies as rocks fell from the ceiling. Dr. Webb was thrown against a wall when a particularly close explosion shook the earth above them. He felt something break in his chest, but he crawled back to where Lisa was hiding under a support beam. "Daddy?" she whispered. "I'm here, baby, I'm here." The bombing stopped after 6 hours. When the Hegemony fleet finally withdrew, New Hokkaido was a graveyard. Of the 2,400 people who had called the colony home, fewer than 200 survived in the deepest parts of the mining tunnels. Dr. Webb was not among them. He died holding his daughter, his body shielding her from the falling rocks when the shelter ceiling collapsed. Lisa survived, trapped in a small pocket of air, listening to the silence where her father's heartbeat used to be. Commander Chun's ship drifted dead in space, its hull cracked open like an egg. She had survived in an emergency shelter on the bridge, but most of her crew was gone. Admiral Zethkar sent one final message before his fleet left the system. "Let this be a lesson to all humans. You are not welcome in our space. Return to your small corner of the galaxy and trouble us no more. If you do not learn from this example, we will provide more education." But as the alien ships jumped back into hyperspace, they made one crucial mistake. They left survivors. And among those survivors was an 8-year-old girl who had watched her father die protecting her from monsters. The rescue ships arrived 3 weeks after the attack. Captain Maria Santos of the UES Recovery led a fleet of 12 vessels through the debris field that had once been a peaceful star system. What they found changed everything. New Hokkaido looked like a planet that had been murdered. The green forests were burned black. The blue lakes were filled with ash and rubble. The colony that had once housed 2,400 people was nothing but scattered ruins and twisted metal. "Dear God," Santos whispered as she looked at the destruction through her ship's cameras. She had served in the Colonial Defense Force for 20 years and had seen many terrible things. But this was different. This was not war. This was butchery. The rescue teams worked for days to find survivors. They pulled 186 people from the collapsed mining tunnels. Most were injured. All were traumatized. Among them was 8-year-old Lisa Webb, who had spent 3 weeks alone in the dark with her father's body. Commander Sarah Chun was found floating in the wreckage of her ship. She was barely alive, kept breathing by her emergency suit's life support. When the medical team brought her aboard the Recovery, her first words were not about her injuries. "Did we save them?" she asked through cracked lips. "Did we save the children?" Captain Santos did not know how to answer. The survivors were taken to the nearest human hospital station. News of the attack spread through human space like wildfire. People gathered in public squares on a dozen worlds to watch the reports. They saw the recordings that Commander Chun had made during the battle. They heard Admiral Zethkar's cold voice explaining that human civilians deserved to die simply because they were human on Earth. Admiral Rachel Torres sat in her office at Colonial Defense Command. She was humanity's most experienced military leader, a woman who had fought in every major conflict since humans first reached the stars. She had always believed in measured responses and diplomatic solutions. But as she watched the recordings from New Hokkaido, something changed inside her. She saw children's toys scattered among the rubble. She saw the burned remains of a school playground. She saw the crater where a hospital had once stood. The hegemony had not destroyed a military base or conquered a strategic position. They had murdered families because those families refused to abandon their homes. Admiral Torres called her staff into the briefing room. Around the table sat the best military minds in human space. Generals and admirals who had spent their careers planning for defensive wars against alien invaders. "Ladies and gentlemen," Torres began, "we need to discuss our response to the New Hokkaido attack." General Harrison, her chief of staff, spoke first. "Admiral, our intelligence suggests the hegemony expects us to withdraw from all outer colonies. They believe we'll accept their lesson and retreat to the inner systems. What do our diplomatic channels tell us?" Torres asked. Ambassador Chun, no relation to the commander who had died defending the colony, shook her head. "The hegemony refuses all contact. They consider the matter closed. Their message to our embassy was simple: remove all human settlements from their sphere of influence or face more examples." Colonel Park, the head of Fleet Intelligence, leaned forward. "Admiral, we need to be realistic. The hegemony has over 300 warships. We have maybe 50 vessels that could match their firepower. A direct military confrontation would be suicide." Torres stood and walked to the large display screen that showed a map of known space. Human territories were marked in blue, scattered across several star systems. Hegemony space was marked in red, a vast area that dwarfed human holdings. "Colonel Park, how many of those 300 ships can the hegemony afford to lose?" "Ma'am?" "It's a simple question. The hegemony controls dozens of worlds, hundreds of trade routes, thousands of installations. How many ships can they lose before their empire starts to fall apart?" Park consulted his datapad. "Intelligence estimates they need at least 200. Ships for routine patrol and defense duties. Any major losses would force them to abandon some territories or leave others vulnerable." Torres smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "So they can afford to lose maybe 50 or 60 ships without serious consequences. After that, they start having real problems." General Harrison looked confused. "Admiral, are you suggesting we try to destroy 60 hegemony warships? That would require our entire fleet and probably wouldn't succeed." "No, General. I'm suggesting something much more ambitious than that." Torres touched a control on the wall display. The map changed to show detailed intelligence reports about hegemony fleet movements, supply lines, and command structures. "The hegemony thinks like a traditional empire. They believe in overwhelming force and centralized control. They build their entire strategy around the idea that they can destroy any enemy that challenges them." She paused and looked around the room. But they made one critical mistake at New Hokkaido. They showed us that they don't fight according to any rules we recognize. They target civilians. They murder children. They destroy homes and schools and hospitals because they want to send a message. Admiral Santos, who had led the rescue mission, spoke quietly. Admiral, what are you proposing? I'm proposing that we send our own message. The hegemony wants to teach us about power. Let's teach them about consequences. Torres touched another control. The display now showed detailed schematics of hegemony infrastructure, shipyards, supply depots, communication relays, command centers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to fight the kind of war the hegemony expects. We're not going to mass our fleets for glorious battles. We're going to fight the kind of war that humans excel at. We're going to make them afraid. Colonel Park studied the display. Admiral, are you talking about guerrilla warfare? Hit-and-run attacks? I'm talking about something much more systematic than that. The hegemony has built their empire on the assumption that smaller species will submit when faced with superior force. They've never dealt with an enemy that refuses to submit. General Harrison leaned back in his chair. Admiral, this sounds like you're planning total war. The kind of conflict that could last for decades. No, General. I'm planning the kind of war that will last exactly as long as it takes for the hegemony leadership to realize they made a terrible mistake. Torres turned back to her officers. The attack on New Hokkaido was not a military operation. It was terrorism. They wanted to break our will by murdering our families. They wanted us to be so afraid of losing more colonies that we would abandon expansion entirely. She walked around the table, making eye contact with each officer. Instead, they've shown us exactly what kind of enemies they are. They've shown us that negotiation and compromise are impossible. They've shown us that they see humans as vermin, to be exterminated. So what do? Ambassador Chun asked. We show them what happens when you make it personal with humanity. Every hegemony ship that participated in the New Hokkaido attack will be destroyed. Every officer who gave orders to target civilians will be hunted down. Every facility that supported the operation will be eliminated. The room fell silent. These were experienced military officers who understood the implications of what Torres was suggesting. She was talking about a war of extermination disguised as justice. General Harrison spoke carefully. Admiral, what you're describing goes far beyond military retaliation. You're talking about systematic destruction of enemy assets regardless of their military value. General, when Admiral Zethkar ordered the bombing of schools and hospitals, he changed the rules of engagement. When he laughed at surrender offers from civilians, he declared that this conflict has no limits. Torres returned to the display. Screen. The hegemony believes in collective punishment. They killed 2,200 innocent people to send a message to all of humanity. I believe in proportional response. We're going to send a message to every species in the galaxy. What message? Colonel Park asked. That when you murder human families, humanity will hunt you to the ends of space. That when you target human children, we will make your entire civilization pay the price. That when you make it personal with yes, no one walks away unchanged. Admiral Santos looked at the casualty reports from New Hokkaido. Most of the dead were civilians. Miners and teachers and farmers who had never hurt anyone. Children who would never grow up to see the stars. Admiral, what about the other hegemony species? The ones who didn't participate in the attack? Any species that continues to support the hegemony leadership after this will be considered complicit. Any government that refuses to condemn the New Hokkaido massacre will be treated as an enemy. Torres touched one final control. The display now showed fleet deployment orders for every human warship in space. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to build a fleet that the galaxy has never seen before. We're going to show every alien species. What happens when humans stop trying to be reasonable? 6 months later, Battle Group Retribution emerged from the Sol system. 200 ships, from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack cruisers. They carried the names of every human who had died at New Hokkaido. Painted on their hulls, the fleet's mission was simple. Ensure that Admiral Zethkar and everyone who served under him would never feel safe again. They were not coming to conquer territory or secure resources. They were coming to teach the galaxy that some lines should never be crossed. The war lasted 2 years and changed the galaxy forever. Battle Group Retribution moved through hegemony space like a force of nature, striking without warning and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. They did not fight like any enemy the aliens had faced before. Admiral Rachel Torres commanded from the flagship UES Remembrance, a massive dreadnought built in the orbital shipyards of Mars. On its hull, painted in letters 10 meters tall, were the names of every human who died. At New Hokkaido, the ship carried no marines for conquest, no diplomats for negotiation. It carried only weapons and the will to use them. The first target was the hegemony naval base at Kepler Station. The base had supplied fuel and ammunition to Admiral Zethkar's fleet before the attack on New Hokkaido. Torres did not want to capture it. She wanted to erase it. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Captain James Morrison announced from his position at the tactical station. Morrison had lost his brother at New Hokkaido. His brother had been a teacher at the colony school. "Begin the attack," Torres ordered. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 50 ships opened fire simultaneously on the military installations below. The hegemony defenders tried to respond, but they were outnumbered and, caught completely by surprise, the battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Kepler Station was a field of drifting debris. Every ship, every weapons platform, every supply depot had been destroyed. The humans had not tried to capture anything. They had simply erased a major hegemony base from existence, but Admiral Zethkar was not at Kepler Station. Intelligence reports placed his fleet at the Kravani homeworld, protected by the strongest defenses in hegemony space. Torres was patient. She had other targets first dot over the next 6 months. Battle Group Retribution systematically destroyed every installation that had supported the New Hokkaido attack. Shipyards that had built the weapons, supply depots that had provided ammunition, communication relays that had coordinated the fleet movements. The hegemony tried to respond with conventional tactics. They gathered large fleets to hunt down the human forces. But the humans refused to fight fair. They would appear, strike hard, and vanish before enemy reinforcements arrived. They used hit-and-run tactics that the hegemony had never encountered. More importantly, the humans were not trying to hold territory. Traditional military doctrine required defending conquered space, which limited how far an attacking force could advance. But the humans did not want to conquer anything. They only wanted to destroy things. This made them almost impossible to counter. The hegemony had to defend everything while the humans could attack anything. Every military base, every supply convoy, every communication station became a potential target. The war began to affect civilian populations on hegemony worlds. Supply ships that carried food and medicine were destroyed along with military vessels. Trade routes that had operated safely for centuries became dangerous. The hegemony economy, built on the assumption of safe space travel, began to collapse. On the hegemony council world of Thakmira, the 4 ruling species held emergency meetings. The Corvani representatives demanded more aggressive action against the humans. The Zilani wanted to negotiate. The Mortaki suggested withdrawing from human space entirely. The Othani remained silent, as they always did. "These humans fight like barbarians," hissed Counselor Vextar of the Corvani. "They target economic infrastructure instead of military objectives. They show no interest in honorable combat." Counselor Lamara of the Zilani disagreed. "Perhaps we should consider their demands. They want Admiral Zethkar and his officers turned over for trial. That is not unreasonable." "Unreasonable?" Vextar's tail lashed in anger. "We do not negotiate with inferior species. We certainly do not hand over our military commanders to satisfy their primitive desire for revenge." But the other council members were not so sure. The human attacks were becoming more daring and more effective. 3 major shipyards had been destroyed in the last month alone. The hegemony fleet was having trouble maintaining its ships without proper repair facilities. Counselor Talek of the Mortaki spoke carefully. Perhaps we underestimated human capabilities. Their military doctrine is unlike anything in our databases. They seem willing to accept any cost to achieve their objectives. What objectives? Vexstar demanded. They are not trying to conquer our worlds or steal our resources. What do they actually want? The answer came from an unexpected source. On the farming world of Veltara, a human strike force had captured a hegemony communication center intact. Instead of destroying it, they used it to broadcast a message across the entire hegemony network. Admiral Torres appeared on screens throughout alien space. Behind her stood the survivors of New Hokkaido, including 8-year-old Lisa Webb. The little girl wore a colonial defense force uniform that had been tailored to fit her small frame. People of the hegemony, Torres began, we want you to understand why your fleets are burning and your bases are in ruins. 2 years ago, your leaders decided to teach humanity a lesson about power. They attacked a peaceful colony and murdered 2,200 innocent people. The camera focused on Lisa Webb. The child looked directly into the lens with eyes far too old for her face. They killed my daddy, Lisa said in a clear, steady voice. They killed my teacher and my friends and everyone I loved. They did it because they thought humans would be too scared to fight back. The camera returned to Admiral Torres. Your leaders were wrong. When you murder human families, humanity does not retreat. When you target human children, we hunt you across the galaxy. When you make it personal with us, we make it personal with you. Torres gestured to a display screen behind her showing Admiral Zethkar's image. Admiral Zethkar ordered the destruction of New Hokkaido. Every officer who served under him is now marked for death. Every installation that supported his fleet will be destroyed. Every world that shelters him will face the consequences. The message ended with a simple statement. Return Admiral Zethkar and his senior officers to human custody, or watch your civilization burn one piece at a time. You have 30 days. The broadcast caused panic throughout hegemony space. Some worlds began demanding that their governments surrender Zethkar immediately. Others called for increased military action against the humans. The unity that had held the hegemony together for 2,000 years began to crack. Admiral Zethkar himself was hiding on the heavily fortified world of Korvax Prime. The planet's defenses included orbital weapons platforms, shield generators, and a fleet of guard ships. He believed himself to be completely safe. He was wrong. On the 29th day of the ultimatum, Battle Group Retribution appeared in the Korvax system, but this time they had brought reinforcements. The human fleet now numbered over 300. Ships, including vessels from the Colonial Defense Force, the Merchant Marine, and even armed civilian ships crewed by volunteers. Admiral Zethkar, Torres broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Rachel Torres of the human fleet. You have 1 hour to surrender yourself and your senior officers. If you refuse, we will demonstrate what happens when someone murders human children. Zethkar's response was broadcast from the planet's surface. I do not negotiate with inferior species. Come and take me if you can. The battle for Korvax Prime lasted 18 hours. The human fleet systematically destroyed every orbital defense, every weapons platform, every ship that tried to protect the planet. They used overwhelming firepower and coordinated tactics that the hegemony had never seen before. When the orbital defenses were gone, the humans did something that shocked the entire galaxy. Instead of landing troops to capture Zethkar, they began bombing the planet from space, but they were not bombing randomly. They targeted only military installations, government buildings, and the compounds where hegemony officials lived. They carefully avoided civilian areas, hospitals, and schools. You see, Torres broadcast to the dying planet. We could destroy your entire world just as you destroyed ours. But we are not like you. We do not murder innocents to make a point. The bombing continued for 6 hours. When it stopped, every major government building on Korvax Prime was in ruins. The Planetary Defense Command was destroyed. The governor's palace was a crater, and Admiral Zethkar was trapped in an underground bunker with no way to escape. The final surrender came not from Zethkar, but from the Hegemony Council itself. Faced with the choice between losing more worlds or sacrificing the officials responsible for New Hokkaido, they chose survival. Zethkar and 23 of his officers were handed over to human custody. The war ended not with a peace treaty, but with a new understanding. The Treaty of Seoul established that humanity would expand wherever they chose, and any species that targeted human civilians would face the full weight of human retribution. 5 years later, Admiral Torres stood in the memorial garden on the rebuilt New Hokkaido. The names of the 2,200 dead were carved into a wall of black stone. Fresh flowers were placed there every day by the new colonists who had come to rebuild what was destroyed. Among the crowd at the memorial service was Lieutenant Lisa Webb of the Colonial Defense Force. She was 13 years old now, already accepted into the Naval Academy for when she turned 16. She wore